Well, now, always with a story, it's difficult to know where to begin if it's quite complicated. But the easiest way, I think, is to begin where one becomes involved oneself. So that's what I've done.
I remember walking into the kitchen and Alice was waiting for me. She knew I was coming. And she just said, "Follow me." And I walked through the kitchen, up the back stairs, and then she opened this sliding door, and in there was a cot for my baby. And that was the beginning. I was just amazed at her generosity and kindness towards me. Someone she didn't even know, she was inviting into her home.
I mean, it's a completely sort of unique idea that a family or a person would open up their house to just really to people who needed somewhere to live.
Alice wrote on the front door here, "The door is open." She just scrawled it one day in paint.
I mean, it is a communal house that is, in its nature, very nature. It's just always been so many people living here.
When I was staying here, I stayed in Alice's room. That's her door. I stayed in that corner. When there were lots of people here, I lived in her room for a while. It just felt normal. She just said, "Oh, you can sleep there." And it was her house, and yet she invited people into her home. And they could make it their home for a while, which is what I did. And it was difficult to leave. It's always difficult to leave here. I don't think you ever leave here. It's a state of mind, this place. Mm-hmm.
Alice I remember very clearly. I can picture extremely clearly. Going around usually with her boiler suit on, her blue overalls.
I can't visualise her in my mind's eye without a wheelbarrow. And she wore these huge Wellingtons, which kind of knocked against her legs when she walked. So you always knew when she was coming.
Alice spent every day in the garden. She was always down at the bottom of the garden doing something. And I remember there was a turkey at one time, and she would shoo the turkey about. Go.
And the chickens, endless chickens. So Nana had 60 chickens or so in the bottom paddocks. She'd buy 100 day-old chicks, 100 at a time, and they'd all be in a little pen. It was so exciting going and collecting the eggs.
She did a lot of gardening, heavy work, digging up borders and digging up vegetable patches.
She was very struck by, the importance of smallholding and growing fruit and vegetables, and how therapeutic that was.
I remember once my father had a bad back, and her advice to him was, "Go and do some digging." that was her cure for a bad back, and he actually said it worked. So.
Alice Roughton had famously, her and David Clark had been responsible for opening up the wards at Fulbourn and suggesting that actually the best way to help people with certain mental health problems was not to sort of lock them down, but was to sort of encourage them to get back out and reconnect with nature.
She really got all that going about getting a community of psychiatric inpatients together and getting them working together, growing fruit and vegetables.
She was unique. She was well before our time. Her love for nature and the environment. If only the world could listen to Alice, we wouldn't be in this state, would we?
We could say today she was a feminist and she was the first woman. No, but she didn't even want to have any label. She was doing what she believed, really, and that's all. If you like it, nice. If you don't like it, so nice as well.
Alice was famous for bringing her work home, as Rosemary used to say. So we used to have the most incredible supper parties here sometimes. But this table, very often there could be 16, 20 people sort of having supper. And then I'd be thinking like, well, I don't know them. And then I'd be thinking like, oh, I think that must be one of Alice's patients. It's a bit odd. And I nearly always get it wrong. You know, I'd confide in Rosemary. You know, who is that person all right? Is that one of Alice's patients? But no, that's one of the dons from Trinity or something. Yeah, so they say it's a thin line between sort of genius and madness or whatever. I think Adam's Road kind of demonstrated that at times really well.
When I was in my teens, I used to come here almost every Sunday evening, which was when Alice had open house.
And Sunday evening was always an occasion, and it was just a sort of, anybody could come. I don't think any specific invites were ever sent out, but word of mouth, word got around.
And sometimes on a Sunday evening you might get upwards of 50 people here. People would sit round in a circle, and Alice would often be sitting on here on the hearth. With the larger gatherings, of course, there weren't enough chairs or seats for everybody, so people would be standing and wandering around and having drinks and conversing. So a trolley would be wheeled in from the kitchen with food on top, and the best thing about the food was the bread, or the bread rolls especially, which were very good indeed.
There was always buns proving. I mean, she used to make about 100 a day. There was always a great big bowl of them just on the kitchen table.
Everything else had to be treated with a bit of suspicion.
She was a terrible cook.
Some of it was kind of edible, some not.
Legendary. It was legendary.
I have some friends who used to live here, and Nico and Damiana, they say that if you once or twice you get sick because of the food here, after that you'll be stronger. I don't know if it's true, but it's nice to believe it.
But the thing that really lifted the place out was everybody else contributing to the cooking, as they had to if they wanted to survive. You couldn't survive on the food that Nana cooked, really. People would just bring other bits of food or nice cheeses or something, and it would all just get put on the table in the oak room.
And Alice would always serve herself last. She would usually come in from the garden in her dungarees, and she'd wait until everybody had served themselves, and then she would eat. Alice would collect the bins from the colleges in those days. She would sit at the other end of the table, having collected them, and she'd spend a lot of time sorting out the custard from the meat. It just seemed like a natural thing to do. She was a conservationist, so, she didn't like waste.
And of course she was an absolute stickler for, once you had something on your plate, and that was it, you had to eat it, no waste.
Do you want to share that story?
Well, I came into the kitchen and there was this absolutely delicious smell, and there were sort of 3 or 4 people sitting around. There's Nana, Garbel and Kathy sitting down the end of the table. And I came in and I said, oh gosh, what's that delicious smell, Nana? It sounds lovely. And she said, oh, well, it's fish and chips, would you like some? So I said, oh yes please, sounds lovely. Unwittingly, and so she served up this fish and chips, which had quite clearly been retrieved from the back of some college kitchen somewhere. The fish inside had kind of, shrunk to a quarter of its size, and the chips were soggy and second-hand, and it was absolutely disgusting. And so I sat down and I took a few bites, and I was sitting here, and I said, well, this is just disgusting, and I'm not eating anymore. And she said, well, you've got to eat it. And I said, well, I'm not eating it. So then there was this standoff. And eventually, Nana left the room. At which point, I just went to the window behind the sink and tipped the contents of my plate out the window. As I was leaving, I sort of said to the people at the table, I said, don't tell Nana that I've tipped my food out the window. And they said, and 2 of them said, no, it's all right, we won't say anything. But Garbel said, well, I'll have to tell Nana, I owe her a duty of loyalty and all this sort of thing. So I had this 10-minute conversation with Gabor, imploring him not to tell Nana, and eventually we reached a sort of, don't ask, don't tell sort of compromise. I finished in the kitchen and went back into the washroom there. Nana came back into the kitchen, at which point I heard this voice saying, "Oh, Nana, you wouldn't believe what Susanna's done," and proceeded to recount that I had thrown my fish out the window and all this sort of thing. And I could hear all this. I thought, oh, God, and Nana didn't say much. But of course, what had happened was I'd completely forgotten that Kathy, when I was having this negotiations with Gabor and the other two residents who were at supper, I'd completely forgotten to speak to Kathy on the matter, who was quietly sitting in the corner minding her own business and not saying anything. But clearly had picked up that I didn't want Nana to know, so she kind of punished me for that by just telling Nana straight away.
Kathy, of course, Rosemary's daughter, was the life and soul of Adams Road. Another example of an exceptional person living here.
Kathy really ruled the roost. I mean, if you want a really powerful matriarch as an emblem of this house, then it was Kathy more than Nana or Rosemary, I think.
She was very, very forthright, very forthright. She would say her opinion and stick to it.
But, she was very loving. She was very affectionate with people that she liked.
No, she was very good fun. She gave a lot of energy to the party. She loved singing, and loved sort of getting everyone going.
And that was a time when, there was still some social stigma, I think, but if people were special and different in some way. I think that was quite difficult for Rosemary when she was little. She was a remarkable person, Rosemary Summers. I remember her saying there was this wonderful, triumphant day when she realised, actually, this is ridiculous. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Kathy is absolutely special and wonderful. To hell with what society thinks. She got this enormous sort of bright red tricycle so that you kind of couldn't miss her. She certainly knitted at that point some very, very bright, colourful clothing so that both her and Kathy would be kind of matching, and you couldn't sort of not see them coming in. She used to sort of be whizzing around town on her tricycle with Kathy. Very proud of her, quite rightly.
She was obviously a very sort of kind of determined, decisive person. She had to be, to have taken on this place and kept it running whilst bringing up, constantly caring for Kathy and being a GP at the same time. That's like a phenomenal thing to take on. And so she definitely still had that kind of sort of air of steel about her, I would say. Yeah.
I guess only now that I realise just how, she worked herself into the bone, really. And she was always saying, oh, well, I'm a human doing and not a human being. And it was absolutely right. She was just up and at it from dawn till dusk.
A lot of family friends and a lot of people from the street who used to come on Christmas Day. So sometimes when you're a child and you're getting a bit tired, it's like, there's no way you can go, there's just people everywhere, it's amazing. Anyway, so I used to run out and hide in the garden, but even in the garden there was people sort of talking everywhere, and it was amazing. I remember Rosemary should always be in the kitchen working away, cooking the meals, getting prepared for Christmas. It's a big thing. You're cooking for 50 to 100 people, and she did it.
I have the feeling that I know people who are sensitive or strong. I know people who are very practical or very philosophical. And here, I have the feeling that the people I meet could have everything together. And Rosemary was a little bit like that. She studied a lot, but she knew how to farm and how to get vegetables.
It's a shame that more people didn't come across people like Dr. Summers, because she had the capacity to make you think, if nothing else, because of the way that she went about living her own life. She had this incredible empathy with people. I think she deeply loved people.
She was very interested in listening. She'd love to just listen to us talking, so I used to just talk to her all the time.
I found that very inspiring to tell her what I'd been up to, because it's kind of pushed me on to do things more and be more active. And yeah, she was always very interested to hear what I'd been doing and always had some sort of advice or a stoic kind of response to things. You were just like, yeah, this thing I'm doing is valid and it is a fun thing to do and I do enjoy it, and she thinks it's important. Yeah.
When I was much younger, you know, when I was sort of under the age of 15 or so, she'd always take time to play board games with me. She actually played with me, and that was lovely.
The questions she made to me, I think, helped me to know myself. I would say better, but I would say to know myself for the first time. Yeah, when I was a teenager. I remember Rosemary asked me, what do you prefer, indoor jobs or works or outdoor? Because she asked me questions that nobody had asked me before. Question, what do you prefer, inside or outside jobs? I said I didn't know, so she told me, okay, you can try. You can try some days, you can do that, and some days you can go outside. Once I had this task to clean everything, so it takes me a long time, like more than a week, because yeah, there are like very important things, no, that people were giving to the house, to Rosemary, Alice, so it's like a kind of museum.
A lot of the plates, the cardboard Shakespeare thing, a lot of these things along the top, the little statues of the musicians, the old lady with the stack of wood on her back. I remember all of those. They've been there for a long, long time. Nobody could use those mugs. They've always hung there. Nana would have them, and she used that one on a Monday, that one on a Tuesday, you know, as they went through the week.
It feels like you're peeking into history. It's just so unusual for a house like this dusty, huge house full of stuff, to be just left as it is. And all the contents inside's been relatively fixed for many, many, many decades.
It has a way of holding people and snagging people, this house. It really does.
Anybody was welcome. Anybody could have a meal here or take part in the activities here without having to justify themselves in any way. So in that sense, I mean, I've never come across any place remotely like it.
So this idea that people were just here, and it could be that they were from the hospital, or it could be they were at King's College, or it could just be that they were, you know, happened along this road and saw the doors open and needed somewhere, you know. That's impressive.
I'm still overwhelmed by the generosity of the family and, you know, having this enormous place and continuing to allow people to live in it. One's always kind of aware of that and trying to reciprocate.
I think this idea that, you know, what is the purpose of life? Well, if you're a Christian and you make that pilgrimage of remembrance and you start saying the Lord's Prayer and thinking about it all a bit deeper, we get to the point where the purpose is to try to create heaven on earth. And I think when you get to places like Adams Road, you start seeing some evidence of that.